Two-time NFL Coach of the Year Kevin Stefanski joining us here in Indianapolis. Well, you had your podium session, you had your little breakaway. Now you're here with us, which is kind of the traditional.
I like this
pattern.
the best out of those three.
Are you just saying that because we're here? Or?
No, I'm not.
Thank you for saying that.
We can spread out. There's not people breathing down your neck.
I thought it was because we were here.
Yeah,
okay,
I was hopeful.
Okay, it's mostly you two guys.
Yeah, okay, all right, good.
You did get us quarter zips the first time we did this, which was very
nice. And
nice.
you mentioned it every time. I think you're coming on a little strong, guys. You can't ask for this. It's
I'm not. It was so generous.
Yeah, but you got to stop talking about it because now I'm waiting for the right moment. I want you to be surprised by it.
Yeah.
I'll be surprised, especially if you want to throw it on a little dream net somewhere. I mean, now we're talking collapse.
Now we can really come.
Yeah,
boy, I noticed.
Whatever. You're just looking
here
for something that you can wear on the golf course. Is that true?
Golf course, the show.
So basically, never take off.
Yes.
Those things are all the same now.
Maybe even do a white tablecloth. I mean, we're evolving as a society.
We are.
To be fair.
Man. Are we?
Well,
great
question. Great question. As it relates to this being able to be worn in a great many places, yes. In other ways, perhaps not.
How this first time we've had a chance to talk to you since the season. I know you do the self-scout and take a look back at all of it. Obviously, a lot to this question, but I'll just phrase it this way. What did you learn?
Quite a bit. And, that's a tough year. 3 wins is not what any of us set out to do. Players, coaches, staff, ownership, fans, you name it. So that's tough, and that's you better learn some things in a season like that so that you can apply those things. You learn things about how you are with the football team. You learn things about schematics in those type of moments. You certainly learn things about guys when, hey, things aren't going our way. How are we going to respond to that? And that's one of the things I will tell you. There's not much that you're happy about coming out of that season. There's not much at all. But the way the guys kept fighting throughout, and I say fighting not just in the games and competing, that's easy, but at practice and competing at practice and pushing each other at practice. So those are hard when you're eliminated from the playoffs. And I thought that was a great testament to the leadership on our football team to keep those guys fighting to the end.
One of the things that I know you've known over the course of your tenure and that has been kind of reinforced, it's very hard to win this league without consistent quarterback play. And that is really kind of the goal of any organization, is to find that, and then that's the leaping off point, right, to see what we can accomplish. As you come here, you've already gotten a lot of questions earlier today about that position. Browns hold the second pick in the draft. I wanted to kind of just either have you reiterate, or maybe I only got a soundbite of it earlier. But when you talk about the quarterback position, what are kind of the 3 non-negotiables or the 3 most important things you want out of the player in that position?
I think people rank traits differently. Some people would say accuracy is the number one thing that you need, and I wouldn't argue with them. Other people would say decision making is the number one thing you would need, and I wouldn't argue with them either. I mean, these are important things. How the prospect, how the person brings those to the table varies. Leadership ability, how they bring the team around matters. Then you start talking about athleticism. Then you start talking about arm strength. So there's so many traits that go into playing this quarterback position, and I think when we look around the league, they come in all shapes and sizes, and there's guys that beat you from the pocket. There's guys that beat you from outside the pocket. There's guys that can beat you in the RPO game. There's guys that there's so many different ways to do it. So for us, when you're looking at all these traits, you're looking for a combination of all these traits. But certainly, I think decision-making and accuracy should be at the top of the list.
So there's one thing I wanted to ask you about, because, for amateurs who are watching this or people who are watching tape, one of the things that's very difficult when you're evaluating a quarterback, for example, it's easier to see the physical traits than it is some of the other things, the intangibles, the decision-making, all of that, because we don't necessarily know how they were coached. We're watching tape. You can give your best guess. Yeah. You can say, okay, it looks like this is the route combination. They're going to, if it's this coverage, it's going to go here. But you don't know. In the case of these 2 quarterbacks, I know we have tremendous ties to the University of Miami in our organization. And you were the quarterback's coach for Pat Shurmur in 2017 in Minnesota. So you actually are in a pretty good position to say, how did you and know when you're watching tape exactly what you're watching. Does that give you a nice advantage or insight really into the tape that maybe other people couldn't have?
Well, I think it really speaks, Nathan, to the complete picture. When you first start evaluating the quarterbacks in this draft, you put the tape on. And here I am sitting there and watching the tape, and just like our fans are watching the tape, and I'm asking that same question. What is he thinking on this play? Why did he make that decision? And then you make a mental note of it, or you tag that play, and then you get into settings like this, or you go to the pro day, or you bring them up to your building on those 30 visits, and then you can delve into those questions, and because that's all part. If you want to have a complete picture of these guys, the tape is really, really, really important. The tape is your resume, but also understanding how they're taught, how they think about football is really important. And then, as you mentioned, having Pat Shermer, who's a dear friend of mine and obviously a big part of my career, getting him on the phone to talk about Shedeur, talk about Travis, talk about, hey, who are the defensive ends you went against this year? Who are the corners that you went against this year? So I try to mine Pat and all my good friends that are in college football. I try to get as much information from them as certainly possible. But I think it speaks to trying to put together a complete picture of these players, which is the tape and their background and getting to know them and the type of person they are and how they process information, how they think about the game. What's today's date? February 26th?
Yes.
We don't have the complete picture just yet. We got to get through the pro day. We got to get through their measurements. We got to get through their private workout, the 30 visits when we bring them up to Berea. All of that will then give us a complete picture. But what we're doing now is formulating that.
And you have all of that, and then there's one other thing, because when you're sitting there at number 2, or if you're going to draft a quarterback high, it better be a personality fit. It's a face of a franchise. There is a responsibility that comes with those type of things. How do you? Is there a personality thing that also has those boxes? When you're looking for that complete picture, how important is that part of it? Because it's a different amount of pressure being a quarterback in the National Football League.
It is, and I would tell you the guys in this draft are really, really impressive, and I'm talking the entire class really has been impressive, and I think that's part of it. The complete picture also includes personality and also includes how they're going to be in the locker room and with their teammates. So it's important at the quarterback position. It's really important at every position. So as we spend time here at the Combine, we're sitting with every position. We're sitting to get to know all of these guys because I know having the second overall pick, I get how important that is. I do. I also know pick 33 and so on and so forth. All of those matter. So you have to do your due diligence. You have to do your homework on all of these players.
When you bring a stage on the quarterback, or it could be any player, but quarterback, I think because of the decision-making aspect of it, they're handling the ball and deciding where it ultimately goes. As you go through and, I'm kind of scrolling through some of my notes here that I made on these two guys, there were plays where I was like, they didn't go the way I thought they would, and those are the ones I wanted to ask about. For you, do you want to watch ones where maybe they go through multiple regressions, or is it ones where, hey, I think I saw it like this, you looked this way, but you still did this? What are kind of the plays that would you really like to go through them with the player?
It's interesting. We were just talking about that with one of the players today, and it's like, okay, what got you back to this? And he said matchup. He said literally his player versus that player. He's like, that corner, we knew all week that when he was in his pedal, he was susceptible to this move. And I'm like, okay, makes sense. Naturally, as you're watching the tape, you wouldn't think that would be the first read, but he had a great reason for it. And that's so much of what this is. Like, hey, tell me what your thought process is, because the tape is awesome. We all love the tape. It doesn't tell the complete story.
Yeah, and big picture-wise, when you talk about 2, you talk about 33, you talk about how deep this draft is. Obviously, you don't want to be picking in these type of places again, but we haven't had a 1 in a while. We get one of those back. We've got a ton of picks here. This is a real shot in the arm for this roster, what you guys are going to do over the next couple of months.
We're going to add good players, and obviously being where we are, hope not to be here again, but while we're here, we're going to add some good players. And as we know, you can trade up, you can trade back. There's 1,000 different ways to do this thing, but I do know that with the players that I've seen on tape, the players that I've met with down here at every position, it's pretty exciting because there's some talented kids down here.
Do you feel like there's been some evolution in the league in the sense that, and maybe this is a one-year anomaly, but the top 12 scoring teams in the league, they went to the postseason this year. 11 of them had first-round quarterbacks. The one exception is Super Bowl champion Jalen Hurts, who was the second-round quarterback, but it's been 2 years ago was top 3 in the MVP voting. Is it almost easier to build a team that can score points and have that? Does that travel better year over year, given the rules? It's so hard to play defense in the NFL. So when you think about kind of the assets when you're going into it, it's like, look, if we can score 24 a game, we're going to be tough.
I think I think everybody's thinking that way. Naturally, the roster and how it shakes out and who you're able to get, you try to put a good football team that gets you in that dance, and then you see where the chips fall at the end. But certainly, if you can have a high-powered offense that's making the other team hang with you, and that Super Bowl's very fresh on all of our minds, that was an impressive defensive performance, certainly, and also just offensively, how they were able to hit big plays down the field.
One of the things that we haven't had a chance to discuss with you is all the changes to your staff. When you make those changes, and in terms of what you envisioned it being, and then the reality of it. How close was it, and how happy are you with what this new staff will be, all the new faces on the staff, and what they will bring?
Yeah, really impressed with this group. I think Tommy Reese is doing an outstanding job with the offensive coaches. They're meeting right now as we speak. They have some meetings down here at the Combine and cover some ground, but really impressive group. They work really well together. We're studying a lot of things, trends around the league, and making sure that we're at the forefront of everything we're doing. And then, like I mentioned earlier, you're putting a foundation of an offense together. That's really, really important. They have a strong, sound foundation that you can fall back on. Now, that will adjust based on the players you get and the players that you get, whether it's in the draft, whether it's in free agency, all those things. As you get to April and you start to understand what the roster may look like, that's when you start to lean into some different things, but you better start with a really sound foundation.
How important was it to you when you think about, and we're not saying it's happening yet too, although the chance that certainly it will, you guys are going to have a young quarterback that comes in, I would guess, to this organization this year. How important was it to have, you've been in this league and done it a long time. You got Bill Musgrave, who has been very well tenured, but then to also have Tommy, who's young, who was playing college quarterback not that long ago, and 2 years ago was the OC at Alabama. To have somebody who's kind of connected to more that modern college game and the way that quarterbacks come in, how kind of do you see that meshing together, and was that part of the decision-making process?
It was. I think it's a really nice pairing of Tommy and Bill for a couple different reasons, just their pedigrees, and like you mentioned, I mean, Tommy's young in his career, but it's an impressive career. I think if you call plays for Nick Saban, that's worth 20 years of your time. So, but he's a really, really good young coach, and then you have Bill, who's been there, done that, both as a quarterback in this league. He's won a Super Bowl. He's been a backup to Steve Young, John Elway, Peyton Manning late in his career, has been an offense coordinator, been a quarterback coach. So he has a lot of pelts on the wall, so to speak. So to have he and Tommy together with that quarterback position, I think is important. And those guys have a really strong relationship, which is no small thing as well.
Yeah, and kind of a transitional phase offensively as well, as you guys, when you put this all together, and I've heard you say this, we will shape it to our players. When you say, what are the Cleveland Browns offensively, what is your answer to that?
Well, I think we talked about having a sound scheme that has an efficient run game, is explosive in the run and the pass game. Those are the key things that what we're looking at. We'd love to be multiple and versatile. A lot of that is dependent on the players that we do get. And that's where it's our job to make sure that the guys that we get, we're playing to all their strengths. So there's ways that we can lean into some things that people are doing with pre-snap movement, and that's based on the guys that we get. And there's other things that people are doing with different bigger bodies in the backfield, if you will. That's really based on the guys we get. So the first part, I would say, is putting a system together, sound system that we all can teach, that we feel really strong about. And then as it becomes apparent who the key guys are, who are the ball-in-hand players, if you will, now you adjust what you're doing based on that.
And kind of as we talk about, the trends in the league and the way things seem to evolve, it's all of a sudden, man, being able to run the ball back at the top of the list, right? And we obviously did that very well in your time here when Nick Chubb in those 4 straight seasons. We all hope that whatever road that takes leads him certainly back to Cleveland. But this is a draft that is loaded at that position. It's a draft that's also loaded at tight end, and you're seeing more kind of that 12 personnel to create mismatches and help the ground game, but then also put defenses in a bind in the pass game. That's something early in your tenure here we did a lot of and did very, very well. Is that something that some of those things you hope to get more back to, I would say?
I think it remains to be seen. Certainly there's things that we want to do, and it's going to be predicated on the guys that we have on the roster. So I say that to say, in 25, are you going to say rehaul and get everything at these positions that, hey, we're going to lean into tight ends, or we're going to lean into running backs? It's so dependent on the guys that you are able to bring in. So we'll see how that all shakes out. Obviously, as you know, the tight end position has been one that we think very highly of. There's versatility to that position. I think if you look around the league and some of the good offenses and the way they're using those guys to make life hard on the defense, that factors into it. But you have to see how the draft shakes out. You certainly have to see how free agency draft shakes out.
The CBD draft has us going 5 offensive players in the first 102. So
that's right.
So
the offensive coaches
don't tell Jim that.
Yeah, the offensive coaches
weapons
are happy.
Points, more.
Can't say the same about Jim and the defense staff.
Be less so. Coach, great seeing you.
Great seeing you, boys. Appreciate it.
Enjoy the rest of the week, and we'll see you back at the home office on the other side of all of this. Coach Stefanski joining us here live at the NFL Scouting Combine.